I made a video today about um, a grid, a world grid that's 36 squares across and 18 squares down, and that's 648 squares, and how it's meant to represent a world map. I'm just trying to explain the bottom of the grid sketching article on the website in relation to that. So I've just very quickly done 1 to 18 across a world grid and 1 to 18 again across a world grid and latitude 1 to 18. And the idea is that for a particular square on this world grid, I want to have an image of a location, a visual image, which gives some clue about the content of that particular square on the world grid. Like, is it all at sea? So it's just sea and no land. If someone was really high up, viewing from a satellite that that did not have very clear zoomed in view, would it just look like the sea, or would it all be land? Or would it be land that's got a large river running through it, so the river is visible, or a huge lake is visible? I tried to break it down into just a small number of choices of what kind of a square it is. And the choices are just sea as the square, all land as the square. The land is coastal, so uh, it meets up with the sea, or it's really not coastal, but there is a big river or a lake, so there is water that can be seen from a satellite zoomed out camera. Or there's more to it than that, so it's hard to describe. But typically you're going to be having all sea, all land, something coastal where land meets the sea, or land where there's a river or a lake. And then if we are talking about land, are we talking about coastal land, but the land itself is an island? Or are we talking about the coast of a big land mass and an island nearby? Are we talking about an island plus another island, an island plus islands, a landmass plus islands, two very big land masses near each other, or something that's harder to describe than that? Um, and those options are listed for where it's land with a big river or a lake in it. Um, is there anything else to note about it? And then the harder to describe, I've got these options as well. Um, see how that goes, because I haven't really thought an awful lot about how that one will work out. So let's go to this square here, which is part of a world map where I think we've got part of America where Florida is. It's probably filled in a bit more over here. And then over here we've got a bit of Cuba, I'd say. So what are we talking about here? Well, there's the American mainland over here, so it's coastal. So we're interested in land meets sea. What else is going on? If we think of Cuba as an island, but there seems to be something else going on here. So it could be mainland plus some islands. So if that's the case, then we're interested in land meets sea, and we're interested in land mass plus islands. And if someone was to think of this as a 5 by 5 grid, so I'll just roughly draw one in there. Um, okay, not brilliant, but I'm trying. So there's a rough 5 by 5 grid, and if we're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way to 25, just get rid of these briefly. Where would I start drawing the water? And I guess the answer would be within the very first of the squares. So it's square number 1, I'd say. But it's a good memory prompt for me because another part of the map with its big square, that could all be land. Maybe the water would all begin from here, like a river that starts here and runs in a straight line down to there. So it would be about here that I would want the first water point to be, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe position 11. My mnemonic for remembering that water position would be to represent that point within 1 to 25 as if it's a letter of the alphabet. So the first square would be like the first letter of the alphabet. It would be the letter A. And then the next thing I'd be interested in is which of these apply. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if it's a landmass plus islands, it's the number 5. So A5 would be the mnemonic. And in the system of hundreds of animal people, there is an animal person who is associated with A5. So if I imagine that particular animal in the room or garden that represents this square of the big grid, if that particular animal is in there, then it will make me think of A5. Therefore, it will make me think of drawing water at the top left, and the number 5 is the fifth item down here, so it's a prompt that there's a landmass plus islands. And hopefully that would trigger my rote memory of what should go in this part of the world map. So I hope I've explained that okay. It's pretty tricky. The other thing I should mention is that each, if it's garden, it's because we're interested in a square that's entirely sea or a square that's entirely land. And if it's entirely sea, then there'll be a flower in the garden. And if it's all on land, then there'll be a tree in the garden. And if the flower or the tree is on the left, that implies that this section of the world map is being used. And if it's on the right or in the center, then that implies that this part of the world map is in use. The particular flower or tree decides how far along to go. And then the latitude is decided by something else that's in the garden from a list of 18. So two items in the garden, a particular flower and something like a barbecue or some other prop, decides what goes in the picture that represents a particular square. So prop number 7 of items you could find in a garden, and let's say this square here was all C, then there'd be a flower that represents the number 8, and you'd expect the scene that happens here to be representing total C, and that it would involve the particular flower on the left-hand side of the picture, and within the picture there would be the garden item that represents number 7. So quite a lot to think about. So that's handling those situations of all sea or all land. If it's to do with what's going on where there's a bit of water and a bit of land, then we're interested primarily with these two situations, where one of them is to do with imagining a scene that's in a fantasy role-playing game, and the other one you'd expect a scene in a living room, and the colour of the room is one of 18 colours to decide the latitude, and the main focal item in the room is to do with the number from 1 to 18 if that item in the room is on the left, but if the item in the room is in the centre or on the right, then we'd be talking about something along this longitude here. There's another video where I show some visuals to do with all of that. This video was to try and make sense for you. This diagram, which is in the grid sketching article near the bottom. There's also a link to a map. It's not my map, and I don't know what the rights on it are, but you can go and look at it. And what's good about it is that it is 36 squares by 18, so it will help you to think about what I've been talking about in this video. I was talking earlier about how there's a 5 by 5 grid, and you can decide or work out where you would draw water. If you had a pencil coloured blue, which of the 25 squares you'd start drawing the water in. I'd start here and then just start colouring in along there. So I'd start at around square 1. Another use of the 5 rows of 5 is to give an indication of how much of a square is water and how much of it is land. I would say that maybe 20 out of 25 squares is water. So if I could store that number 20 in an encrypted way within the scene, within the uh, loci place that represents this square, then that would be handy for triggering the memory of whether it's a very, very watery land meets sea, or whether it's mainly land and just a little bit of sea within the square. And to store that number 20, I can use my colours article, where there's a particular colour that means the number 20. And so the focal prop in the room, regardless of whether it's a living room or a role-playing game room, the object that's the focus of that room can be colour filled with colour 20. and that would be the helpful prompt of how much water, what proportion of water as a number out of 25, what proportion of water is in the square.